Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Battle Through the Heavens episode number 139 based on novel. So let's start. Old Ghost Jai Xing frowned slightly as he looked at Zi Yang, who was blocking in front. His eyes rotated twice over the latter. For some unknown reason, he discovered that he was actually unable to see through Zi Yang's actual strength. While he could not see through it, he could still sense that Zi Yang was unable to pose much of a threat to him. Perhaps it is some unique items that can shield one's aura. Old Ghost Jai Xing muttered to himself within his heart. Immediately, his eyes turned towards Xiao Yang behind. At this moment, the latter shook the ring on his finger after summoning 3 types of heavenly flames. A wisp of dense white flame slowly rose from it. 4 types of heavenly flames. Seeing this scene, Old Ghost Jai Xing could not help but shrink his eyes slightly despite his calmness. His expression also changed a little. The might of something like the heavenly flame was extremely great. However, it was incredibly rare. One would be considered to be greatly blessed to obtain one of them. However, Xiao Yang's hands had 4 types of heavenly flames. How could this not cause Old Ghost Jai Xing's heart to tremble? This brat is indeed a little mysterious. From the looks of it, he seemed to be preparing to unleash some extremely powerful attack. Old Ghost Jai Xing guessed Xiao Yang's intention after seeing the latter's solemn expression. Although he was uncertain about just how powerful the Do skill that Xiao Yang had prepared was, his usually cautious character would not allow Xiao Yang to successfully display it. This was the case even if he did not think that Xiao Yang could turn the situation around. Brat, do not continue to act recalcitrant. This will only cause your fate to be increasingly painful. Old Ghost Jai Xing laughed in a dark and cold manner while this thought flashed within his heart. His feet stepped on the empty space and he slowly walked towards Zi Yang. Vast and mighty black fog lingered behind him and a pressure spread. This had caused the aura of quite a number of Hall of Souls experts to become a little sluggish. Faced with Old Ghost Jai Xing slowly walking over, Zi Yang's pretty face also became increasingly solemn. A rich purple light surged out from within her body and her hand was also tightly clenched. Are you going to step aside yourself or do you wish for the old me to attack? The old me does not know how to go easy on a beauty like those young people. Old Ghost Jai Xing slowly extended his hand after stopping a couple of dozen feet in front of Zi Yang. He aimed it at Zi Yang from a distance and spoke in a faint voice. Just attack if you want to. Why do you have to say so much nonsense? Zi Yang merely curled her lips and laughed in the face of the enormous pressure from Old Ghost Jai Xing. You are indeed the same type as that brat. Even your tone is this dislikable. Old Ghost Jai Xing's face became a little gloomy. A chillness suddenly surged over his eyes. Immediately, he clenched his hand that was aiming at Zi Yang. After Old Ghost Jai Xing clenched his hand, an invisible ripple immediately spread in a lightning-like fashion. Soon after, the space around Zi Yang appeared to have been pinched by an enormous invisible hand. It suddenly sunk amidst a wave of cracking sound. The space around Zi Yang ruthlessly compressed towards her. If one was to firmly pressed onto that majestic force, even the flesh of an expert at the peak of the Do Zone class would immediately burst apart. However, when the compressing space was about to touch Zi Yang's body, that purple glow lingering around her suddenly fluctuated. Immediately, it spread. When it did so, the sinking space that was violently compressing inwards solidified. After which, it slowly disappeared into nothingness. You are still too tender to be playing spatial force in front of this grandaunt. Zi Yang randomly resolved this spatial compression. After which, she curled her little mouth and spoke in an elderly manner. Interesting. A surprise flashed across Old Ghost Jai Xing's eyes when he saw that Zi Yang had easily resolved this spatial pressure that even someone at the peak of the Do Zone class would be helpless against. He immediately laughed coldly and clenched his hand. After which, a punch was thrown without any fancy move. Bang! This punch from Old Ghost Jai Xing had just been thrown when the majestic black fog immediately fluctuated in a monstrous manner. While it wiggled intensely, it transformed into a 1,000 feet large enormous black giant python. It subsequently roared towards the sky. With a swing of its huge tail, it emitted a ripping sound and tore through the empty space. At the same time, it carried an incomparable wind and rushed over towards Zi Yang. The black large python rushed through the sky. That powerful wind pressure that was created directly caused a couple of 100 feet long gully on the ground of the valley even though it was thousands of feet away. Some large rocks burst apart on the spot. Zi Yang's face also changed slightly in the face of this ferocious attack by Old Ghost Jai Xing. A rich purple light surged out from within his body. His hand was also clenched tightly. Purple light vaguely agglomerated into a blurry dragon head on his fist. Ancient Void Fist. Zi Yang let out a delicate cry. Purple glow suddenly erupted from her hand like a volcano. Immediately, a purple light large dragon that was a couple of 100 feet large left his hand while carrying a sharp palm wind and a dense dragon's might. It roared towards the sky and violently collided with the large black python. Bang! A soul-stirring sound immediately erupted when the two collided. Terrifying air waves swept apart in the sky like a windstorm. The cliffs around the valley and the southern square collapsed on the spot. Enormous stones rolled down. Finally, the heavily landed onto the bottom of the valley, emitting a loud sound as they did so. Groan. Ziyang's delicate body continuously pulled back as the frightening air wave surged over. A low moan was emitted from her throat. Fortunately, she did not suffer any injuries. The air wave raged in the sky for a moment before finally scattering. Those gazes that old ghost Zhai Xing used to look towards Ziyang also became increasingly strange. Although the punch from Ziyang earlier was strong, it was impossible to completely receive his palm attack. From his senses, that purple dragon light had cut open a spatial crack line when the two collided and sent the majority of the attack by the black python into the empty space. This mysterious fist technique was something that old ghost Zhai Xing had never even heard of. What a strange fist technique! Old ghost Zhai Xing laughed in a strange manner. Immediately, his eyes glanced at Xiaoyang's direction. This glance caused his entire body to be filled with cold sweat. This was because Xiaoyang was already forcefully kneading the 4 types of heavenly flames together. Looking from a distance, it appeared just like an extremely wild and violent fireball. A terrifying temperature spread from that spot. Old ghost Zhai Xing could clearly sense that the moisture in this entire place was swiftly being vaporized. Those green grass in the valley was swiftly withering at a speed visible to the naked eyes. This brat is a little strange. I cannot delay any longer. This strange scene finally caused old ghost Zhai Xing to feel a little uneasy. He was naturally clearly aware of the might of the heavenly flame. Moreover, the strength of the 4 types of heavenly flame being stacked on each other, even he would likely feel terrible should he be struck by it. This thought flashed across old ghost Zhai Xing's heart. His expression swiftly became dark and dense. With a flash of his body, he appeared in front of Ziyang in a ghost-like fashion. He slammed with his large hand and a vast and mighty force slammed towards Ziyang's chest in a lightning-like fashion while carrying a frightening shape-shattering strength. Faced with old ghost Zhai Xing, who had suddenly used lethal attacks, there was a slight change in the expression on Ziyang's pretty face. She could not pull back at this moment. Otherwise, should she end up giving the former an opportunity, he might interrupt Xiaoyang's heavenly flame merger. Hence, she could only step forward. Purple light lingered over her as her hand directly collided head-on with old ghost Zhai Xing. Bang! 2 figures followed each other like shadows in the sky. Each time the purple light and the black fog collided, it would bring about a thunder-like explosion. At the same time, numerous muffled groans would continuously appear. Bang! Another fierce collision occurred in the sky. The purple-colored figure was finally unable to hold out any longer. A mouthful of bright red blood was involuntarily spat out from her mouth. Her body was also shaken until she continuously pulled back. It was a moment later before she stabilized her body. That pretty face of hers was filled with a paleness. She was no match for old ghost Zhai Xing when it came to this kind of head-on clash. Was it not because Ziyang had a strong constitution and that she was born with great strength? It was likely that the veins in her body would have been forcefully shattered during these dozen-over-palm collision. After all, an expert at the peak of a 5-star dozun was really too strong. However, compared with the pale pretty face of Ziyang, a great storm was brewed within old ghost Zhai Xing's heart. After exchanging blows, he clearly understood that the former's strength was merely that of a dozong. However, this seemingly gentle and weak girl was even more terrifying than Xiaoyang. Not only did she forcefully received over a dozen punches from him, but that terrifying strength that was vaguely reflected had actually caused his hand to become a little numb. This girl, just what kind of monster is she? The corner of old ghost Zhai Xing's mouth twitched and a killing intent suddenly surged within his eyes. These people were not ordinary people. They must never be left alive to cause future troubles. Otherwise, the next time they meet, the one who was unlucky might be him instead. Star-plucking hand. The expression of old ghost Zhai Xing finally became completely dark and solemn as killing intent surged within his heart. He densely looked at Ziyang, who was watching him with caution. After which, he let out a cold laugher. Black fog surged over his hand before he suddenly grabbed it. This grab was extremely strange. This was because old ghost Zhai Xing's hand had strangely disappeared when he did so. Only his arm was still left outside that space. A rich sense of danger surged within Ziyang's heart when she saw this strange scene. Her body hurriedly withdrew. However, she suddenly sensed a chill on her neck when he was pulling back. Immediately, a great force was transmitted over and firmly grabbed her neck. Die. You are the one who will damn well die. A killing intent surged within the eyes of old ghost Zhai Xing when his hand grabbed Ziyang's neck. He was just about to kill her when a spatial crack line was suddenly formed a short distance away. Immediately, a strong tower-like figure rushed out from it. His fist violently smashed towards old ghost Zhai Xing's head. That manner was such that old ghost Zhai Xing's head would burst apart with a bang should he be struck by it even with his strength. This sudden unexpected change caused old ghost Zhai Xing to be shocked. It was definitely impossible to adopt a life for a life method. Hence, he released Zi Yang in a lightning-like fashion and his palm collided with the metal fist that was fiercely charging over. Bang! A terrifying storm erupted. Old ghost Zhai Xing took 2 continuous steps back. That strong body of his flew backwards. After which, it landed beside Zi Yang in a somewhat staggering manner. Big fellow, didn't you go and roam the continent? Zi Yang held her throat and coughed. After which, she looked at the large man beside her and gasped with surprise. The big man was naturally Xiong Zhon, whom Zi Yang had brought out from the pill realm. At this moment, he also let out a dry laughter. After which, he carefully looked at the spatial crack line that had been torn earlier. He mumbled, "Damn it, it is not that the old me wished to come but I was thrown over." Old ghost Zhai Xing had a gloomy expression as he looked at Xiong Zhon from a short distance away. After sensing that the latter was also a Do Zun, his eyelids twitched involuntarily. His expression changed abruptly before he could speak. After which, his eyes hurriedly turned towards the direction that Xiao Yang was located, only to see an exquisitely beautiful fire lotus formed by 4 colors slowly being suspended in Xiao Yang's palm. An annihilation-like strength that caused his heart to feel a little chilled quietly spread. Through the delay caused by Zi Yang, Xiao Yinar had finally managed to merge and form an annihilation fire lotus that was created from 4 types of heavenly flames. The fire lotus was merely the size of a palm and was suspended over Xiao Yang's palm. The core of the lotus was made up of 4 colors. At a glance, it appeared incomparably beautiful. However, under this beautiful surface hid an annihilation-like terrifying strength. Xiao Yang's expression had become quite pale at this moment. A heavenly flame that was merged from 4 types of heavenly flames was not as easy to create as he had thought. Although he had the experience from merging the annihilation fire lotus in the past, the life-transforming flame was not a true heavenly flame. There was naturally less trouble when merging it. This time around, however, he had used 4 types of genuine heavenly flames. The difficulty of merger was exposed almost immediately. If it was not because Xiao Yang's strength could be considered to have soared and that his soul had advanced to the so-called soul state, it was likely that he would not be able to truly successfully merge the annihilation fire lotus even if he possessed 4 types of heavenly flames. Moreover, the fire lotus at this moment was not a complete success. The destructive energy within it was far too terrifying. Even Xiao Yang could only carefully mediate it until an equilibrium. Only then did he dare to use it to deal with an enemy. Cold sweat continuously appeared on Xiao Yang's forehead. After which, it followed his face and fell like flowing water. His eyes were staring intently at the fire lotus slowly rotating on his palm. Vast and mighty spiritual strength was continuously poured into it. What a terrifying destructive strength. Old ghost Zhai Xing in the sky a short distance away also had a drastic change in expression because of this scene. The destructive force that was spreading from within the fire lotus even caused an uneasiness to surge into his heart. How is it possible for this brat to display such a frightening attack with his 9-star Dozong's strength? The corner of old ghost Zhai Xing twitched slightly. Immediately, murderous desire surged in his eyes. This person must not be allowed to live. With this thought that was filled with murderous intent flashing over his heart, the expression of old ghost Zhai Xing had instantly become ferocious. His body moved and he transformed into an afterimage while rushing towards the location where Xiao Yang was located. He could sense that the attack of Xiao Yang had yet to be fully completed. If he interrupted it at this moment, he would definitely cause Xiao Yang to suffer a backlash. At that time, he would not only be able to destroy this terrifying attack but he would also be able to finish off Xiao Yang while doing so. It was really killing 2 birds with 1 stone. The figure of old ghost Zhai Xing had just moved when it was discovered by Zi Yang. She hurriedly cried, "Big fellow. Quick. Stop him." Xiong Zhon by the side laughed bitterly upon hearing this. All he could do was to nod his head. His feet stomped onto the empty air and his body rushed out like a cannonball. He caught up with old ghost Zhai Xing after accelerating for a couple of times. With a furious cry, he raised his metallic fist and violently smashed towards the latter's back. Xiong Zhon's actual body was an ancient dragon bear. The strength of his physical body was extremely frightening. When this punch was thrown, even the space itself was bent a little. The invisible air formed a circular concave arc on the surface of his fist. A deafening rushing wind sound continued to resound over the place. A fierce glint also flashed across old ghost Zhai Xing's eyes when he sensed that ferocious punch of Xiong Zhon behind him. He glanced at Xiao Yang a short distance away, after which, he clenched his teeth. His body was twisted in a strange manner but he actually did not turn around to fight. Xiong Zhon was also stunned when old ghost Zhai Xing did not turn around. However, he could not be bothered with this. Since you did not turn around, you will just receive my beating. Zi Yang's originally pale face no longer had even a trace of blood when she saw this scene. She stomped her foot and chided Xiong Zhon angrily. Xiongzhan had a face containing a bitter smile when he saw that old ghost Zhai Xing had went all out to endure a punch just so that he could kill Xiao Yang. Immediately, Xiongzhan gritted his teeth and charged forward in a stifled manner. He wanted to send old ghost Zhai Xing flying at this last moment. However, it was obviously too late for him to move now. The moment old ghost Zhai Xing appeared above Xiao Yang's forehead, the seal formed by his hand changed abruptly. Black fog surged out in all directions. In an instant, it had formed a 5 feet large dark black ghost claw in front of him. The ghost claw had a dark and deep color that was terrifying. It was sinister, appearing just like the hand of a death god climbing out from hell. At a glance, it caused one to feel a chill over one's entire body. 9 imprisoning ghost hand. The expression of old ghost Zhai Xing became increasingly ferocious after dark black ghost claw was formed. He cried out coldly towards Xiao Yang. Immediately, the ghost claw was swung downwards without mercy. It violently slammed towards Xiao Yang's chest. This attack by old ghost Zhai Xing had basically used all the dou qi within his body. That ghost claw might not be large, but space crumbled wherever it passed, revealing a dark black hole in the process. That ghost claw appeared even more sinister and frightening when mixing with this hollow space. The speed of the ghost claw was extremely swift. Within a flash, it had penetrated through the empty air and appeared in front of Xiao Yang. That dense wind, which was contained on the ghost claw, caused Xiao Yang to feel a kind of extremely dangerous aura. At this kind of extremely critical moment, there was no longer anyone who could rescue Xiao Yang in time. Xiao Yang also appeared to be aware of the current situation he was in. He looked at the savage face of old ghost Zhai Xing and a crazy expression suddenly surged into his dark black eyes. If you wish to kill me, you will also accompany me to death. When the crazy expression surged within his eyes, Xiao Yang ceased bothering about the energy within the annihilation fire lotus that had yet to stabilize. His hand shook and the fire lotus left it. The fire lotus transformed into a fire glow that rushed towards old ghost Zhai Xing, who was within close proximity. Xiao Yang's expression instantly paled upon suffering this lethal attack. A mouthful of blood fog was spat out. There was even a clear bone-breaking sound being transmitted from his chest. His body was also shaken by that terrifying force until it flew out like a cannonball. The corner of Xiao Yang's mouth revealed a dense arc the moment his body was sent flying. This was because he saw the face of old ghost Zhai Xing, which was covered with horror at this moment. The annihilation fire lotus had exploded. Bang! The firestorm that was 1,000 feet large instantly erupted. If one looked up from below, the storm appeared as though it connected the sky and earth, appearing just like a miracle. The firestorm was rampant as a destructive ripple spread like a wave. That incomparably firm large black hall within the valley had finally collapsed at this moment. Many experts from the Hall of Souls emitted a puff sound upon being struck by the ripple of destruction and turned into a cluster of dark black ash. The destructive ripple continued to spread for nearly 1,000 meters. Everything was red within a 1,000-meter radius. The dense forest was also destroyed at this moment. The Dozuns from both parties in the distant sky watched the valley that had basically vanished within an instant. A shock surged into their eyes immediately, after which, they inhaled a deep breath of air. Such a terrifying destructive strength was something that even some of the Tianzuan within the Hall of Souls had difficulty achieving. Boom! Xiao Yang's body, which was flying backwards, heavily shot onto a mountain wall. Large rocks rolled and buried him inside. Soon after, a lovely figure hurried over. She waved her hand and shattered the large rock. After which, she grabbed Xiao Yang from inside and swiftly rose into the sky, dodging the spreading destructive ripple. How is he? Xiongzhan flashed and appeared beside Zi Yang. He hurried asked as he looked at Xiao Yang, who was covered with fresh blood. The latter's chest had even sunk inward. Zi Yang's face was so dark and solemn that it was frightening. This was the first time that she had seen Xiao Yang suffer such a serious injury. A full-force attack by a 5-star Dozun was something that no one present could receive. Even less needed to be said for Xiao Yang. The sound of rushing wind resounded over the sky. Feng Zunja, Little Fairy Doctor and the rest hurriedly came over in a flash. Their expressions changed when they saw Xiao Yang was covered with fresh blood. Just as Little Fairy Doctor and the rest had a drastic change in expression because of Xiao Yang's injury, an intense spatial fluctuation was suddenly emitted from within the enormous firestorm. Immediately, two vast and mighty aura that was even more powerful than old ghost Zhai Xing slowly appeared. The hearts of Feng Zunja's group immediately sunk when he sensed these two vast and mighty aura. This aura was that of someone from the Hall of Souls. The expressions of Feng Zunja and the rest changed slightly upon hearing the icy cold voice that resounded over the sky. Immediately, their eyes focused intently on the spot where the firestorm had disappeared. There, three figures had appeared within their line of sight. Two of the three who had appeared were unknown old men. They were dressed in black and white robes respectively. The clear color made it easy for others to identify them. At this moment, the expressions of these two were covered with a shady expression. A branch hall was destroyed. If one looked into the matter, it was likely that all the members of the Hall of Soul present would not be able to escape responsibility. After everyone's eyes swept over these two people, their gazes paused onto the figure, who was between the two of them. In an instant, their expressions became a little interesting. The condition of that figure was currently not much better than Xiao Yang. He was similarly covered with fresh blood. The skin that was revealed outside of his robes had revealed a large amount of blood and flesh. His sleeves had already been completely blown off. Moreover, fresh blood continuously dripped from his sleeves. One of his arm had actually disappeared. Seeing this miserable manner of old ghost Jiaxing, regardless of whether it was Feng Zunjia or old Mu Jiyu, all of them were completely stunned. Immediately, his heart violently inhaled a deep breath of cool air. Finally, numerous shocked eyes turned towards Xiao Yang, who was in Ziyang's embrace. This fellow, he actually relied on his 9-star Dozong's strength to turn an expert at the peak of a 5-star Dozun into such a miserable manner. Old Mu Jiyu swallowed a mouthful of saliva while his face was covered with perspiration. Those eyes which he used to look at Xiao Yang had an additional fear and joy. He rejoiced that Xiao Yang did not use such a frightening fire lotus against him back then. His strength was far inferior to old ghost Jiaxing. If he was to suffer such a blow, he would definitely perish on the spot. Old ghost Jiaxing coughed intensely. Mouthfuls of fresh blood was continuously being vomited. One could even see some internal organ fragments within the fresh blood. Clearly, old ghost Jiaxing had not only lost an arm this time around, but his internal injury was also unprecedentedly serious. It was normal for him to even die. Everyone looked at each other upon seeing this scene. Their hearts quietly sighed for this old man. Even if he could survive from such serious injuries, it was likely that some sequelae would remain. It was not impossible for him to have difficulty advancing his strength any further in the future. Kill that brat. I want to tear him into tens of thousands of pieces. Blood foam continued to seep out from the corner of old ghost Jiaxing's mouth. However, his eyes were still viciously staring at Xiao Yang. The hatred he felt towards the latter was monstrous at this moment. With his peak of the 5-star Dozun strength, he would actually end up suffering such a terrible loss in the hands of a 9-star Dozong brat. How could he calm the fury within his heart? The two black and white-robed old men by the side looked at this manner of old ghost Jiaxing. Although their expressions were still icy cold, there was an astonishment surfacing in their eyes. They were clearly aware of the strength of this old ghost. He might not be comparable to the two of them, but his strength was not far away. It was unexpected that he would actually end up with such a fate today. You old ghost. You really can only blame yourself for this. If you used the spatial jade to summon the both of us once you discovered them, how would you end up in such a fate? That black-robed old man's tone contained some fury. Currently, the branch hall has been destroyed. If the hall chief pursues the manor, you will suffer for it. Forget it. It is pointless for you to tell him this now. Don't you know what kind of character this old ghost has? Capturing Xiao Yang is considered a deed with great merit. Earlier, he thought that victory was assured and would naturally not call the both of us over to divide the credit. I think that if it is not because he has been forced by the other party until such a manner, he would not use the spatial jade. The white-robed elder coldly laughed. Some fury also surged in the eyes of old ghost Jiaxing when he saw this faint mockery from these two. However, he currently did not possess the ability to display even the slightest anger. The intense pain that was continuously transmitted from within his body clearly told him that the injury that he had suffered this time around had already reached a fatal extent. If he was not careful, it was likely that he might not even be able to keep this life of his. Greetings to black-white Tianzuns. That old Mu Jiyu and the others also hurriedly flew over at this moment and respectfully greeted these two old men. All of you also have some responsibility for the destruction of the branch hall. White Tianzun glanced at the couple of them and spoke in a faint voice. The expressions of old Mu Jiyu and the rest changed upon hearing this. However, they did not dare to say anything more. All they could do was to smile bitterly and admit it. Currently, the only way for all of you to use merit to make up for your mistake is to capture Xiao Yang. All of you should be aware of this point, Black Tianzuan coldly said. Old Mu Jiyu and the others hurriedly nodded. From the looks of Xiao Yang's condition, he had clearly fought with old ghost Jiaxing until they were both seriously injured. He should no longer be able to use another of that terrifying fire lotus attack. White Tianzuan patted old ghost Jiaxing gently. A gentle force entered the valley. There was still some members of the Hall of Souls who had managed to keep their little lives there. At this moment, they could only get them to look after this old fellow first. Don't delay any longer. Let's attack. Together. Black Tianzuan spoke in a deep voice. Currently the strength on their sides held the absolute advantage. He would naturally not give up this kind of advantage. Currently, the most important thing was to grab Xiao Yang first. Otherwise, once the hall chief become furious, the people here would end up suffering. It is actually black-white Tianzuan. Unexpectedly, even these two old demons have hurried over. Feng Zunja looked at the distant white and black old men. Their expressions were somewhat dark and solemn as he slowly spoke. Today, it is likely not easy to escape. The strength of these two old demons are a little stronger than old ghost Jai Xing, adding the few remaining Dozuns. This lineup surpass us. Taijian Zunja spoke in an indifferent manner. Although the current situation was dangerous, there was still not much of a change to his expression. It was as though he was not involved in his situation. Looks like we might have to go all out once. Zi Yang, bring Xiao Yang and leave, little fairy doctor softly said. It was clearly already impossible for them to withdraw safely in this kind of situation. Someone must stay behind to delay these people. Little fairy doctor's voice had just sounded when her arm was suddenly grabbed. She turned her head, only to see that the one who had grabbed her was Xiao Yang, who was covered in fresh blood. She involuntarily felt a heartache upon seeing the latter's appearance. This was also the first time that she had saw Xiao Yang, who was usually laughing, appearing so miserable. Although his opponent was at the peak of the 5-star Dozun class. Do not leave some last words. It is not impossible to escape. Zi Yang clenched her silver teeth. She appeared to have made some resolution as she spoke in a deep voice. All of you should quickly follow me in a while. Do not hesitate. Otherwise, even I will not have any solution. Zi Yang did not give them any time for inquiries after her words sounded. She bit the tip of her tongue and a drop of dark golden blood suddenly flew out. Finally, it landed on the tip of her finger. Zi Yang's expression became deathly white when this drop of golden blood appeared. Even her body began to sway unsteadily. Zi Yang forcefully stabilized her body. Her hand seal changed. Immediately, that delicate finger of hers, which had touched the dark golden blood, suddenly cut across the empty space in front of her. A spatial crack line slowly appeared. Zi Yang's hand seal changed once again when this spatial crack line appeared. The crack line was slowly opened like a tightly shut room door. Following the appearance of this spatial door, some dense cold sweat appeared on Zi Yang's clear forehead. You wish to leave? The activity of this area had immediately been discovered by the black-white Tianzuns. Their expressions sunk as they let out a cold cry. They waved their sleeves and two mighty black fog pillar cut through space before rushing over towards Xiao Yang's group. Feng Zunja and the rest had a slight change in expression when they saw the black fog pillar rushing over in an explosive manner. He was about to act when Zi Yang spoke in a deep voice, "There is no time to fight. Whoever fights will not be able to leave." Everyone's body paused upon hearing this. Their expressions were a little complicated. An instant later, little fairy doctor looked at the black fog pillar that was rapidly arriving. She clenched her silver teeth and was just about to rush out when she was being forced back by a palm. Taijian Zunja immediately stepped forward. His voice was indifferent as he said, "All of you should leave. Yarrow Chen, you have done me a great favor back then. Today, I shall return it to you." Taijian Zunja laughed faintly. Before Feng Zunja could say anything, his body moved and rushed out explosively. The do qi within his body surged and forcefully received those two black fog pillars. However, that frightening force shook him until he directly spat out a mouthful of blood. With his 2-star Dozun strength, how could he be a match for the black-white Tianzuan? Ha ha, I have taken my great revenge. All that I seek for is death. Being able to die in the hands of the Hall of Soul Tianzuan is really worthwhile. Taijian Zunja rubbed the trace of blood from the corner of his mouth. He laughed out loud towards the sky. Immediately, everyone was stunned to discover that the do qi within the former's body had suddenly become wild and violent at this moment. Be careful. This fellow is about to self-destruct. The faces of the black-white Tianzuns changed slightly upon seeing this. They quietly cursed crazy within his heart. This fellow was really intending to seek death. While Taijian Zunja was blocking the Dozuns from the Hall of Soul, the spatial door was finally slowly opened. Immediately, a rich silver light surged out from within and wrapped around Xiao Yang's group. The light had just wrapped around them when the spatial door suddenly trembled intensely. Zi Yang's face also changed slightly. With her current strength, she had strained herself too much by forcefully attempting to open a spatial door and shuttle through the emptiness. Moreover, the most important issue was that she was bringing a group of people with her now. Just when the spatial door shook with greater intensity and a despair involuntarily rose within Zi Yang's heart, the trembling spatial door suddenly began to strangely solidify. Light once again burst out. This time around, the light was actually unprecedentedly strong. The spatial fluctuation was also extremely stable. Zi Yang was startled when she saw this kind of change. Immediately, she appeared to have understood something. A gratitude flashed across her eyes. Her hand seal suddenly changed and the light from within the spatial door burst out. Soon after, a frightening suction force surged from it and forcefully dragged Xiao Yang's group into the spatial door. After everyone entered it, the spatial door shook and disappeared. A helpless sigh finally sounded after Xiao Yang's group had successfully entered the spatial door. A dark black spatial crack line suddenly appeared behind Tai Zunja, who was about to self-destruct, and swallowed him inside. This sudden unexpected change directly caused the black-white Tianzuns to be stunned for a moment. A long while later, their eyes suddenly turned towards the location where Xiao Yang's group was at. However, the place was completely empty. Their expressions immediately turned green. This was an extremely vast and endless desolated plains. One could still see some green grass patches on the plains. However, most of it was a desolated bright yellow color. Occasionally, some eagles would fly in the sky above while being accompanied by a couple of sharp eagle cry. Desolation covered this entire plain. At a certain moment, the space of this place rippled. Immediately, a dark black hole was split open in this empty space. A couple of human figures exited from it in a somewhat miserable manner. After which, they landed on the ground. Ziyang, are you all right? Little fairy doctor hurriedly asked when she landed and saw Ziyang's pale white face. Ziyang shook her head. Purple light flashed on the body. Immediately, she began to slowly shrunk. Within the blink of an eye, she had turned back into the little girl from before. She panted a little before wiping off the cold sweat on her forehead and said, "It's nothing. I will be fine after resting a little. You should take a look at Xiao Yang's condition first." Feng Zunja by the side held Xiao Yang's pulse the moment he appeared. His expression became increasingly ugly after a deep probe. Everyone's heart sunk when they saw this manner of his. While everyone were completely silent, the dark black ring on Xiao Yang's finger shook. Yarrow Laro's illusory body flashed and appeared. He grabbed Xiao Yang's pulse. A moment later, a murderous intent suddenly surged within his eyes. He coldly said, "Old ghost Jai Xing, what a vicious tactic. Old fellow." Feng Zunja felt a lament when he saw his old friend at this moment. However, now was not the time to catch up on old times. The most important thing now was Xiao Yang's injuries. "Mr. Yarrow Laro, how is Xiao Yang's injury?" Little fairy doctor's pretty face was a little pale as she softly asked. "The veins in his body are all shattered and 70% of his bones are broken. That palm of old ghost Jai Xing had contained all of his strength." Yarrow Laro's voice was low and deep as he spoke. That usual smiling face of his currently contained a ferociousness no matter how one saw it. "Hall of Soul, from today onwards, we will not rest until one of us die." Yarrow Chen's savage voice caused Feng Zunja by the side to sigh softly. It was the first time that he saw the calm and indifferent Yarrow Laro show such an emotion in so many years. Even when Han Feng had betrayed Yarrow Laro back then, the latter did not show such a surge in emotion. It seemed that the importance of Xiao Yang in his heart was quite great. Little fairy doctor's already pale face became even whiter when she heard Yarrow Chen's words. Her delicate body swayed unsteadily. Ziyang by the side hurriedly supported her upon seeing this. Such a serious injury. Tianhua Zunja and Xiong Zhon exchanged looks with one another before sighing softly. Forcefully receiving a full force palm from an expert at the peak of the 5-star Dozun class. Forget about Xiao Yang, even the two of them would likely end up losing their lives on the spot. It was already not easy for Xiao Yang to still have a breath left at this moment. There should still be some method, right? Aren't you known for being able to save someone as long as that person still has a breath left? Feng Zunja hurriedly opened his mouth to speak after seeing that everyone had dark hazy faces. However, he smiled bitterly when he spoke. He had forgotten about Yarrow Laro's current condition. Not only did the latter not possess a body, but he had been turned quite weak by the Hall of Soul. How would he possess the kind of strength that he had when he was at his peak? Yarrow Laro's expression was gloomy. He sat beside Xiao Yang and looked at the latter's face, which was covered with fresh blood. The killing intent within his heart once again surged without control. It was the first time that he had such a rich desire to kill in his heart in these many years. He was aware that if it was not because Xiao Yang had come to rescue him, the latter would definitely not allow himself to fall into such a dangerous situation, given his shrewdness. "Calm down first. Xiao Yang had rescued you after much difficulty. Aren't you delivering yourself to be captured if you head to the Hall of Soul now?" How could Feng Zunja, who had been acquainted with Yarrow Laro for so many years, not know what the latter was thinking after seeing his expression? Immediately, he patted Yarrow Laro's shoulder and softly spoke. "The most important thing now is not to seek revenge but to rescue Xiao Yang." Yarrow Chen also inhaled a deep breath of air after hearing this. He was aware that Feng Zunja was right. At this moment, he must definitely not create trouble. "You should think properly about what should be done. With your alchemist skills, you should have some solution," Feng Zunja said. Yarrow Laro inclined his head slightly. The ferocious expression on his face was withdrawn. His hand rubbed over Xiao Yang's pulse and carefully probed deeply into the condition within the latter's body. When he focused and probed deeply, the familiar Yarrow Zunja aura on his body also gradually seeped out. Back then, he had shook the entire continent. who was not aware of the name Yarrow Zunja. Many super strong individuals wished to befriend him but was unable to find a way to do so. Although he had currently fell into a low point, it was not difficult for him to recover to his peak with his ability. However, these were not the things that he currently needed to consider. If any accident was to occur to Xiao Yang, it was likely that Yarrow Larrow's remaining life would be lived with a crazy vengeance. Seeing Yarrow Larrow focusing his mind and engaging in a deep examination, the few people beside him also did not dare to make any noise and disturb him. Xiong Zhon and Tianhua Zunja separated and guarded against any sudden and unexpected situations. A quiet and tensed atmosphere lingered over this entire area. It was a long while later before Yarrow Chen, who had his eyes shut, suddenly opened them. He softly said, "The situation is a little better than I had imagined." Little Fairy Doctor and the rest let out a soft sigh of relief upon hearing this. Currently, they were unable to endure even more blows. There is a way to save him. Feng Zunja also asked while feeling rejoice. The constitution of this little fellow is extremely strong. That palm from old ghost Zhai Xing should have severed all of his life force. However, he had managed to forcefully endure through it. Moreover, there is the heavenly flame guarding his heart. Hence, it is not truly fatal. Yarrow Larrow fondled his beard and slowly said. Moreover, the interior of his body currently has a heavenly flame helping him repair his injured body. You mean, the 3000 burning flame? Little Fairy Doctor asked softly. Yes, the 3000 burning flame is known as the undying flame. Little fellow, who has swallowed and refined it, also possess this kind of special characteristic. As long as the 3000 burning flame is not extinguished, it is possible for any injury in his body, regardless of how severe it was, to be healed. Yarrow Larrow nodded and said.